Welcome everybody to a very special edition of the Wombat Sports Nuggets. I guess this won't be a podcast. I'm going to be posting this on my YouTube channel because it's a very important kind of thing that's been going on. It's been crazy to say the least. Obviously, I've been covering the sport of women's wrestling for quite a while on wombatsports.com, and I just released the documentary Girls Grappling and Grit on the website as well, and I'm getting a lot of traction with that. But crazy things have been happening in the past couple of weeks. I mean, not to mention so many states, still getting their girls high school championships taken care of. But it's been great to be able to see all the growth that has been. But kind of some negative news over at Full Combat, which I've had some dealings with in terms of documentary. A lot of these female grapplers, female wrestlers, and the Greco guys haven't been feeling that they've been getting promoted lately. So there's been a real push this past week, and tomorrow, or if you're watching this on Sunday today, please follow that How She Wrestles hashtag. You'll be able to see some of the stories. And I'm interested. There's a very good seminar going on in the morning that you may not miss. If so, I'm pretty sure it'll be posted somewhere, and I will let you guys know about that. But I wanted to get a very, very talented wrestler on with me right now. She is one of the top Olympic U.S. team wrestlers here in the United States. Sorry to say she won't be wrestling this summer because the Olympics have been delayed until 2021. But she's one of the top wrestlers right now in the world as well. She's also the founder of Lucha Fit. Very, very talented. Katherine Shai is on with us right now. How you doing, Katherine?
Good. Thanks for having me, Mark.
Yeah, it's been impressive. Like I said, just watching the growth of how the popularity of women's grappling has been going. But like I said, a lot of sites aren't picking up on that right now. Tell me a little bit about where you're seeing in this situation with Flow Combat, and how this movement came about.
If you are not like in the kind of like the scene or watching women's wrestling consistently, it's always been something that we've discussed, whether it was just amongst each other. There's definitely a few women. Victoria Francis is one who's actually posted statistics of how often women are posted versus men. And, part of that coverage, it's something that's been lacking for a long time. It's something we've had to work with USA Wrestling with, but that's also a partner with USA Wrestling. So it's not just, Flow being their own kind of entity. There's a lot to it, right? It's kind of like as if a swimming organization or a swimming promotion said, we're only going to cover the men's half of the races and we're going to leave halfway through. Like, women have literally experienced that with Flow Wrestling. So this has been ongoing since the beginning of Flow Wrestling, let's say. So really, it's kind of just a beautiful moment that things can kind of come to light. And the ladies, we're very close in contact right now because we're using things like WhatsApp and text message or whatever, but mostly WhatsApp, to kind of stay connected as a national team. So now we have consistent meetings, we have Zoom calls, we have this, we have that. And so it's allowed us to have this opportunity to really come together and say, hey, what do we need to do? How do we move forward? Hey, how should we band together? So it was a combination of quite a few things. So even though there was a huge conversation going on at Twitter, there was a side conversation going on our WhatsApp group, and hey, what's going on with this, and who knows, these kinds of things. So because since then we have now had conversations with some high ups at Flow Wrestling. We've had conversations amongst each other. That's how we came together and are starting to build on the How She Wrestles campaign. So this is really just a lot of years of frustration, right? A lot of years of having to say, have we proven ourselves? Are we at this level where we're allowed to be in this space yet? This is a conversation that's needed to have had. It's kind of been pushed under, right? It needs to happen. And it's coming to light at a moment where we're definitely more banded together because all of us have said something at some point, but not in this really cohesive way.
Yeah, I would almost say that was very similar situation to when when the women's divisions were starting in mixed martial arts, there was not very much coverage because they weren't in the UFC at the moment. They were, they were relegated to maybe Strikeforce at the time or whatever, but there would be very few sites that would, even cover the women's divisions of the sport. I mean, I think I was one of the first to, I was probably second generation pretty much when it came to covering in sports. Guys like Robert Sargent over at MMA Rising and Tim Peterson and a couple other people that were my mentors had actually started covering some of these fights from the early 2000s, and I came in right around 2007 and started kind of doing it as well. So some of us smaller guys were actually doing it a lot longer, and I kind of feel for you guys because I don't think that there are very many venues for you ladies to have a voice, basically, because there's a lot of sites like myself that have at least covered a little bit of wrestling. I wish I could clone me about another 5 times so I could have at least somebody to cover the women's portion of it. I just have way too much on my plate. But, I think it's kind of crazy. And the fact that the way that Flow is structured is kind of crazy too, because it's almost like a monopoly on you guys. Because kind of side story here for me is the fact when I was doing the documentary, I went to the what was it? The Schultz, Dave Schultz, and I was told that I could get a press pass from the Dave Schultz. I could not necessarily shoot video at the Dave Schultz because Flow had that copyright on that video, which is kind of crazy because if you're a media source like me, I want to post video. I want to post at least a little bit of video to my readers, and that's kind of crazy as well. I got under that. I got actually away with it with the WCWAs that year because I went to the university. I didn't go through Flow Combat, so I think there are some things that Flow needs to do in order for us press to be able to do it as well. But also we need to encourage more press to get you guys a platform as well. And I think that's going to be very important coming in tomorrow. I'm telling all my press people to, that my press friends to watch the event and go out as well. So, I think that's the big important thing. The big important thing is to try to get you guys some publicity and try to get your names out as well. What things that you think that you could that we should do to be able to get the word out about women's wrestling right now?
I think that's, what you're saying is kind of like step one to a certain extent. The fact that I agree with you, video is king. Having access to video, because you're putting like a face to a name to an action, right? Like all those components are really important. And the more that you are excluding like these media entities that may have, especially locally, they're like, hey, we don't normally cover wrestling, but we'd be interested because it's a local event. And they're like, no. They're like, okay, I'm done. So it's going to be these groups that are outside of wrestling that try to come in for an event are denied, and then they're not going to try because they're not like hardcore wrestling fans that are just going to keep trying to come in. So that's a huge issue. So then it's like, how do we creatively get around it? So I think there's media, any small media groups, like just the more we can cover is a big deal, right? So and it's also reaching out, to a lot of different females, because there's so many in the sport that are just not known. Like that's been our complaint, like from day one, is that because men's wrestling has a beautiful platform with NCAAs. It's covered heavily. They have press conferences. You get to follow all these men as they enter into senior level. It's a really easy transition to keep following along. But if you don't know the women in college, once they get to senior level and our national team is barely promoted, then you're not getting to know the top 3. Don't even get me started with the top 10, right? Like you're not going to know the top 10 at all, but you'll definitely know top 10 in men because those men came from the NCAA and were promoted. So it's starting kind of from the ground up. Like, is there ways to promote the college women more? People need to take advantage of interviewing the entire national team instead of just like the onesie twosies of the women's, national World Olympic teams. Like even a lot of women on our Olympic teams have been ignored. So that's a big deal. There's a lot of pressure as an athlete to begin with to not only win once, but to like win multiple times. And then in the US, it's like, oh, finally you'll get paid attention to. And part of it's kind of like the way we've manipulated our media kind of has manipulated it to be like, unless you're Michael Phelps, you know, where are you in this process? Are you a good enough Olympian unless you've won these many medals? So I think we put such a high standard on what it should look like to get press, and like, oh, you know, even within wrestling, we've done that to ourselves. So we have to take advantage of the opportunities of interviewing great athletes and not putting so many roadblocks in front of it of like, this athlete has to look like this or be like this. And let's just keep covering the sport.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I kind of pride myself on Wombat because you know, when I started, and I told you this before we started recording, is that I started the website because I wanted to see what the future lies in terms of the sport. And I think people have a tendency to right now say what's now and not what's the future of what's going to be happening now. And, you know, I mean, the good news is that we've kind of crossed the hurdle in terms of NCAA inclusion, because we're starting to see that they're going to accept it. But the question is what kind of coverage they are. I still complain a little bit about why they have the NCAA wrestling tournament the same weekend as the beginning of the final, the beginning of the March Madness tournament. They should have at least a week before. I don't know why that is, because I mean, you're basically stabbing yourself in the foot in terms of ratings. You know, and you'd be able to find a place to be able to have people watch. So, you know, I think it's kind of crazy. I mean, even the WCWA doesn't have much in terms of coverage besides Flow Combat, which is kind of crazy too.
Right.
You know, the only ones that are going to focus really on trying to get that is going to be the very hardcore fans. So I think that it's important for us to kind of see if we can get some of these fans to be able to watch and get a bigger platform for you ladies as well. How has it been I mean, having talked to who you've talked to, I mean, have you talked to any of the collegiate gals and what their thoughts are right now?
You know what? That was actually something I tweeted about recently, was that I don't feel like I have a very good connection with a lot of the collegiate women unless they're kind of in the space of being vocal already, which would be like Bree Santos, Emma Bruntill. I'm trying to think who else is in college, not graduated, that I'm like closer with. There's only like a few sprinkled here and there. So kind of the response I got back was like, most of them are on Instagram, which Instagram is fine, and you can definitely kind of get a message across, but in a very different way. It's not a discussion. So for the fact that a lot of those college women are not on Twitter having this conversation, I don't think they're as involved as they need to be. So I think that's actually something really interesting to even bring up and maybe encourage more women to get onto the platform so they're kind of part of these conversations. So really, like, I would have to say I'm not really sure, besides the few that I know that are on, maybe on national team or almost on national team competing senior level, and they've kind of been in the conversation already, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and they had to get comfortable at some point to do media. I think, again, this is something that goes back to the women's division of mixed martial arts right now. You got to get kind of comfortable in front of the camera. You have to start getting comfortable, doing some of these interviews as well. I think it's going to be very important. So hopefully more sites start covering that. So these gals can get practice to be able to do that as well. I've been seeing, like I said, there's a lot of crossover support, I think, from this. I mean, we've seen gals that have crossed over from wrestling over into the mixed martial arts realm as well, and they've been showing their support when it was looking like the wrestling was going to be leaving the Olympics. There was a lot of mixed martial arts support in terms of that as well, and I've seen quite a few. I mean, when I was at the Wrestle Like a Girl conference a couple years ago, I was there with Tisha Torres and Raquel Pennington from the UFC. Happened to be good friends with, and they were they were there helping the sport as well. how much, I mean, how much are you looking out to kind of help to reach out this beyond the wrestlers that are there to maybe some of these female athletes that are currently having a pretty good platform for themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. Carla Esparza tweeted. She's my college teammate. So she called me and kind of wanted to discuss and have a good idea about like what the whole Twitter discussion was, you know, and getting a good idea, you know, because it's kind of beyond the semantics of like Pat Downey and his specific like feelings, you know. It really just opened up a whole conversation and everybody got very passionate about it. So she wanted to really have a good understanding of like what it meant and what, you know, kind of like, let's brush off the stuff that really doesn't matter and let's get down to like what actually matters. So she did a tweet that, you know, kind of represented how she felt, you know, the community coming together and supporting women in wrestling, and wrestling's her first love. So the importance of that. And, you know, I think I saw a few other tweets where it was, you know, women saying, I don't think the UFC is upset that they decided to add in women. And that's truly like, you know, Dana White had this like really strong stance, I guess, about I'm not going to add women. Seems like it wasn't like too much convincing to finally get women into the UFC. And since then, it's like definitely no turning back. So as much as you can use the argument of like Flow Wrestling is their own entity, they can do whatever they want business wise, they're still just like fairly misrepresenting the sport. And in my opinion, truly just it's bad business sense to not even include an entire division that could get you new subscriptions. Like there are young girls, high school age, who are already in the mindset that Flow sucks. Flow mistreats us. Like my sister, who's a coach and women's director for Virginia, she said at I believe Super 32 that they blocked off the boys' final match. They were there the whole day. It was like a regular tournament. And then when it came to the finals, they blocked off the boys' finals match with curtains, a spotlight over that mat, and then the girls wrestled their finals literally in the dark behind the curtains. Like that feels shitty. Like that's not okay. You know, despite the fact that you're like, this is the entity we want or whatever, like it just comes down to like, they have no clue how to market then, you know, and unfortunately they've come up with a lot of excuses and reasons. And then they've also just been very blatantly sexist because people have offered and, you know, stated that they would help support or please do our event. And they're just like, nope, women don't move the dial. We're not doing it. So there's a lot there.
Yeah, you know, I mean, and that is, you know, I think again, going back, I mean, just looking at where women's martial arts were back in the day. I mean, that was what the situation was. They maybe had them, you know, had one match as a treat, maybe they, you know, and it wasn't taken seriously. And, yeah, you know, it's lousy to hear that they're put, you know, somebody wrestling in the dark someplace. You know, it's like you're not giving them a chance to show the shine on their own. You think your mindset's the only thing that you're saying that, oh, it's you know, it's kind of it you know, women's wrestling sucks. It's your mindset. It's not what, you know, what the public is. And we're in a movement right now where we're seeing a really pro girl, pro women athletes push, right? You guys are getting the short end of the stick on what's been an absolute revolution across all of the female athletes in the world right now. So, you know, we're seeing women's soccer be the most dominant in the world here in the United States, and they're not getting paid as well as the guys are, and it's more popular than the guys are. So I don't see how these guys are kind of thinking in the back of their heads, and they're missing out on a huge group of viewers. They're missing out on 53% of the United States viewership, which is female, which is kind of crazy, you know? I mean, when Ronda came to the UFC, the women's viewership spiked when they came in. And we're still seeing those spikes with a lot of these gals. So I'm hoping that Flow kind of thinks about, you know, their ratings And you know, a lot of girls, and on the other side, the flip side of that, a lot of you ladies are canceling your Flow subscriptions because, you know, they want to show you how much impact that viewership has on on Flow Wrestling. So I'm really hoping that that they get the hint, and hopefully this push right now will give them the hint to maybe, you know, maybe consider doing all female events, and maybe be able to showcase some of you ladies, especially coming into the Olympics with a very strong Olympic team.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Now it's going to be crazy. Well, now, like I said, Sunday, which is tomorrow. So if you guys are watching this early tomorrow morning, please just, or even if you're watching Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, just go to the hashtag How She Wrestles. You'll be able to hear a lot of these stories as well. Like I said, there's a seminar tomorrow that I'm going to be watching with a bunch of other people. I'm pretty sure of it. You know, about what's been going on as well. So I'm interested to see kind of what goes on there. Like I said, it'll probably be posted somewhere, and I'll let everybody know about that as well. Besides that, I do want to ask you one question off topic, and that's currently, like, you currently run LuchaFit right now. We're kind of in the middle of COVID. Kind of tell me how the business is going, what you've been doing to kind of adapting to the current situation.
Yeah, you know, I think with LuchaFit, which is most of the content right now has been towards this like educational storytelling kind of platform. I would say last year I did a lot more in-person events. I did a lot of kids clinics. I still do a lot of one-on-ones. So right now, majority is my online platform, which is actually really great timing. I wasn't able to do very much when I was competing. And so right now I've had a few athletes who've picked it back up and are wanting to do kind of like, I do a lot of that mindset, mental coaching, video review, things like that. So, so luckily that's set up for that. And, you know, besides that, it's been a challenge to do LuchaFit this past year anyways, because of my competition schedule. So right now, when COVID started, I kind of was thinking like, hey, what's my project going to be? Like, wrestling's going to look different. That whole thing's going to feel different. Like, training's going to look and feel different right now. And that's okay. So, so I decided to, I was pretty inspired by the Players Tribune. They were doing just like a little athlete series on what life looked like and how they kind of were coping. And I thought that the tone was really important to share how everyone's feeling, how they're training, what their life looks like. Super important. So, so I started a series called 6 Feet Apart, and it's kind of working through a lot of people within the wrestling community and hearing their stories, hearing their journeys with COVID and how they're dealing and how they've adjusted themselves. The recent one I did was actually with a photographer, wrestling photographer. So his is actually really interesting. Justin Hawk is who it's with. And his is really interesting because he's had to talk about like he was going to do a project on wrestlers building towards an Olympic year, what that looks like when you are in a different country, you have different resources, your life looks totally different. Like, how do people actually do this? So I thought that was an incredible series, but he's kind of like, hey, how will I, like, is this project going to happen? Will I be able to travel before the Olympics? So he has no idea what that project looks like. And so his story was just really incredible, just to hear about like, what does it mean to be in his shoes right now? It's a little bit of like a walk in their shoes. And so that's the project I have. On there, I have Clarissa Chan, Jessica Medina, their perspective as coaches. I have Helen Maroulis on there. Helen did one for me. Alice Glaudet. I had a student athlete from Harvard who's actually working on starting a women's wrestling club. So just a lot of different perspectives, and I'm going to continue to release them slowly based on my schedule and what I can do. So that's the project of the moment. Well,
if you need any MMA fighters, let me know. I'll send them your way. I know quite a few. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that would be pretty interesting, especially considering the sport right now is actually still going on. So,
right.
So it's been kind of crazy in terms of how they're having to prepare for a fight and all that as well. It'll be interesting come Olympic trials and kind of going through all that stuff right now, because I'm assuming there won't be any crowd, if there's going to be even a limited crowd in there as well. So it'll be interesting because I know in the MMA world, you'll be able to hear your coaches relatively clearly from your corner, and to be able to kind of not hear the crowd, but just hear, what's going on in the arena as well. Do you, is that going to be a little bit of a shock to you once you start getting back to competing?
Funny enough, last October, I competed in the Olympic test event. So I got to compete in Japan, where they're going to have, the stadium's not built out. So it was kind of like airplane hangar-esque, where we're going to compete. I'm sure it'll look completely different, but it was more like they do a run through of like the people who are going to do the tournament. So they do a test run tournament with the women. So they did not because it's not built out, they let no fans in. So it was like dead silent. It was really kind of a bizarre experience. And you know what? Sure, a crowd always changes things a bit. But I wouldn't say it's like it changes the outcome of the match, So I think when it comes down to it, I'm just going to be so excited to be in the space of competing for an Olympic spot, and whatever it has to look like is fine, because I'm just going to prepare myself to go and compete well, and I'm just excited for that to happen. And you have to just continue to keep yourself really positive, and the whole community, all of us have to stay really positive about those kinds of competitions moving forward. So, I can't make any expectations of what it's going to look like or what it needs to be. That's where I think the shock would show up. If I was like, it needs to have a crowd, then I might be upset. So you know what? I actually don't need anything. I just need me to be ready and my coaches to be in my corner, and whatever it looks like, I'll just be ready to win the spot. So.
Yeah, I really look forward to that. And, I'm assuming NBC is going to be probably airing those. I'm crossing my fingers. The NBC is going to be airing those as well. So, NBC Sports has expanded its reach a little bit more. So I'm able to watch finally, which is nice. So yeah, I'm going to be very interested in watching this as well. And the last Olympics, I was all on it. I was covering you ladies and every single combat sport I could possibly can. On there as well. So I'm really looking forward to see who all does. So I'll be cheering for you once you're on the screen as well. Anything else you want to add?
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. You've definitely been there through all these crazy conversations, and it's it's time to keep pushing on and adding more women on. And listen, if you want some contacts with some ladies to get on the podcast, I think that'd be great. I definitely have some suggestions, and there's some women who have been really super involved in the conversation and some not as much. So I feel like both sides need to be represented, in podcasts and conversations, etc. Right? So hopefully more women on.
Yeah, I've been, I've met Julia several times during my documentary run as well, and I need to get her, once this starts rolling, maybe I'll get her back on the podcast. I'm actually wearing her shirt right now, by the way.
There you go. I was like, what shirt is that?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I'm definitely interested in doing more with the ladies as well. I think I said MMA is kind of down at the moment. We've got a couple events going on with Invicta and all that, but I'll do my part. I would love to get more female wrestlers on showcased on here as well. I mean, the documentary I think is doing it's doing okay. I've got some very huge interest in it. I may need to reshoot. If I do reshoot, I know there's a lot of gals like yourself that are going to be very interested in speaking your mind and your piece about that as well. So I'll let you guys know about that as well. But I did send you the link. So if you want to get a minute to watch,
I will take a look.
Definitely
take a look. Yeah, thank you for touching that. I appreciate it.
No problem at all. And again, thanks for your time. I want you to get back to your kids and back to everything you're doing, and we'll keep in touch.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks, Mark.